April 16th, 1945, the Pacific Ocean, 50 miles north of Okinawa. If you were standing on the deck of the USS Laffey at 8 o'clock that morning, the first thing you would notice is the silence. The ocean here is not just water, it is a graveyard. For 3 years, the United States and Imperial Japan have been tearing each other apart across these waves. But on this particular morning, the sea is glass. The sun is rising over a horizon that looks like a painting. The air smells of salt spray and heavy bunker oil. It is a beautiful morning, and that is what makes it terrifying. In war, a beautiful morning usually means you can be seen for miles. Sitting alone in this vast, blue emptiness is the USS Laffey, hull number 724. She is cutting through the water at 15 knots, leaving a white wake that trails behind her like a scar on the ocean's surface. To the untrained eye, she looks powerful. She bristles with weaponry. She carries 6 massive 5-inch guns, mounted in 3 twin turrets. She has 12 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns and smaller 20mm Oerlikons scattered along the railings. She looks like a floating fortress, but the sailors on board know the truth. They know exactly what they are riding. The Laffey is an Allen M. Sumner-class destroyer. These ships were designed for one thing: speed. They are the greyhounds of the fleet. They are built to sprint, to hunt submarines, and to screen the larger carriers. But to get that speed, the naval architects had to make a sacrifice. They sacrificed protection. The hull of the USS Laffey is made of steel plating that is only 1/2 of an inch thick. Think about that for a moment. 1/2 of an inch. That is thinner than the width of your thumb. It is so thin that a standard infantry rifle bullet, fired from close range, could punch right through the skin of the ship. A heavy machine gun round would shred it like paper. And a high explosive bomb, it would not just damage the ship, it would eviscerate it. This is why the crews call these ships tin cans. They are fast, they are deadly, but they are incredibly fragile. They are eggshells armed with sledgehammers. Inside this fragile shell lives the crew. There are over 300 men on board the Laffey, but to call them men is almost an exaggeration. If you walked through the mess hall that morning, you would see faces that should still be in high school. The average age of the crew is just 19 or 20 years old. These are kids from farms in Iowa, from factories in Detroit, from fishing towns in Maine. Some of them have never seen the ocean before they joined the Navy. Many of them have never shaved. It is 8 in the morning, so the ship is waking up. In the galley, the smell of strong, bitter coffee mixes with the smell of frying bacon. Down in the berthing compartments, sailors are rubbing sleep from their eyes. A young kid sits on the edge of his bunk. He is holding a fountain pen and a piece of V-mail paper. He is writing to his mother. He tells her the food is okay. He tells her the weather is nice. He does not tell her that his hands are shaking. He does not tell her that he is afraid he will never see her again. Another sailor is on the fantail, smoking a cigarette, watching the smoke drift up into the clear blue sky. He is thinking about a girl back in San Francisco. He wonders if she is awake yet. They are normal people living in a steel box thousands of miles from home. But the men on the bridge, the officers, they are not thinking about home. They are thinking about the map. Commander Frederick Becton stands on the wing of the bridge. He is a seasoned veteran. He has seen ships sink before. He knows the cost of war. He looks at the chart table. He looks at the position of his ship. Radar Picket Station number 1. To understand why the Laffey was sitting alone in the ocean, waiting to die, we have to understand the cold, mathematical logic of the American admirals. By 1945, the American fleet was massive, but it had a weakness. The Japanese Kamikaze planes were flying low, skimming the waves to avoid detection. They would appear out of nowhere and slam into the aircraft carriers before the Americans could launch their interceptors. The fleet needed eyes. They needed an early warning system, so the Navy created a ring of steel around Okinawa. They drew 16 circles on the map, surrounding the island like the numbers on a clock face. These were the radar picket stations. The plan was simple: take a destroyer, equip it with the most powerful radar available, and park it 75 miles away from the main fleet. If the Japanese attacked, they would hit the Picket ships first. The destroyers were the bait. They were the sacrificial lambs sent out to the slaughter to buy time for the expensive aircraft carriers. Of all the 16 stations, station number 1 was the worst. It was located directly north of Okinawa. It was the closest point to the Japanese mainland. It was right in the middle of the flight path for every bomber coming from Japan. The sailors called it the gateway to hell. And that is exactly where the Laffey is sitting. Commander Becton knows the statistics. He knows that the life expectancy of a ship at Station 1 is measured in hours, not days. He knows that just yesterday, another destroyer in this position was hammered until it sank. But he has his orders. He turns to the radar room. This small, dark room is the heart of the ship's defense, and it is also the source of their greatest danger. Let us look at the science of 1945. The Laffey is equipped with an SC-2 air search radar. At the top of the mast, a large rectangular antenna spins round and round. It works by sending out high-frequency pulses of electromagnetic energy. These radio waves travel at the speed of light. When they hit a solid object like a metal airplane, they bounce back. The antenna catches this echo. It travels down a wire into the dark room, where it appears as a glowing green blip on a cathode ray tube. It is a miracle of technology. It allows the Laffey to see the enemy from 60 miles away, long before they are visible to the naked eye. But there is a flaw in this technology, a fatal flaw. Radar is active. It is like shining a flashlight in a dark forest. Yes, the flashlight allows you to see the bear hiding in the trees, but the flashlight also tells the bear exactly where you are. The Japanese knew this. They had planes equipped with special receivers. They did not need to use their own radar. They simply listened. They could hear the electronic pulse of the Laffey's radar from over 100 miles away. They could track the beam right back to its source. So, as the Laffey's antenna spins, sweeping the horizon, it is doing two things. It is searching for the enemy, and it is screaming into the electronic void, "Here I am, come and get me." Back on the bridge, the radio crackles. It is a report from a nearby patrol plane. Bogies inbound, large formation. Becton stiffens. He looks at the horizon. The trap has been set. The bait has been taken. Down in the mess hall, the coffee cups stop clinking. The letter writing stops. The heavy, rhythmic thumping of the general quarters alarm begins to sound. Bong, bong, bong. It is a sound that hits you in the stomach. The young kids, the 19-year-olds from Iowa and Detroit, drop their pens. They grab their helmets. They rush to the ladders. There is no panic. There is just a grim, silent determination. They run to the gun mounts. They strap themselves into the steel seats. They load the heavy shells into the breeches. They are about to face the entire might of the Imperial Japanese Air Force, and they are doing it in a ship with skin as thin as a coin. The calm of the morning is broken by the sound of hydraulics whining and breeches slamming shut. Commander Becton lifts his binoculars. In the distance, the blue sky is beginning to speckle with black dots. The radar Picket station has done its job. It has found the enemy. And now, the enemy has found them. The floating target is about to become a battlefield. 8:30 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Laffey, the air is thick. It is a windowless room, lit only by the eerie glow of red battle lights and the green sweep of the radar scope. The radar operator, a young man named Sonny Downs, is staring at the glass screen. A moment ago, the screen was clear. But now, a green speck of light appears at the very edge of the display. Target bearing north. Range 18,000 yards, the bridge acknowledges. But then the screen changes. Next to the first blip, another appears. Then two more, then five. Downs rubs his eyes. He thinks it might be a malfunction. He thinks it might be sea return, ghost signals caused by waves. But the blips do not disappear. They multiply, 10 targets, 20 targets, 30 targets. The green light of the radar scope begins to bleed together into a solid mass. It looks like a storm front moving across a weather map. But this is not rain. It is metal and high explosives. Downs picks up the voice tube. His voice is tight. Captain, many bogeys, closing fast, estimate, 50 plus 50. On the bridge, the officers exchange glances. A standard attack usually involves 3 or 4 planes. Maybe 10 if it is a coordinated strike. But 50 planes is not an attack. It is an extermination. To understand why 50 young men were flying to their deaths on a beautiful April morning, we have to look into the soul of Japan in 1945. The Americans saw these pilots as fanatics. They called them madmen. But the Japanese saw themselves as something very different. They were the Shinpu, the divine wind. This specific mission was part of a massive strategy called Operation Kikyusui. Translated, it means floating chrysanthemums. The name was not chosen by accident. It refers to a 14th century samurai warrior, Masashige Kusunoki. He was a man who fought a losing battle for his emperor. He knew he would die. He knew his army would be slaughtered. But he went into battle anyway, carrying a crest of chrysanthemum flowers on his banner. His motto was, 7 lives for the country. 600 years later, the Japanese military leaders resurrected this spirit. By 1945, Japan was burning. Their cities were being firebombed. Their navy was at the bottom of the ocean. Emperor Hirohito, the man considered to be a living god, asked his military council a single haunting question. Is our air power not sufficient to stop them? That question sealed the fate of thousands of young men. The pilots flying toward the USS Laffey were not mindless robots. They were university students. They were poets. They were sons. Before they climbed into their cockpits that morning, they wrote final letters home. These are known as death poems. They cut off a lock of their hair and fingernails, wrapping them in white paper to be sent to their parents so their families would have something to bury. They drank a final toast of sake. They wrapped a hachimaki headband around their foreheads, often emblazoned with the rising sun. And they were told a lie. They were told that their sacrifice would save Japan. They were told that if they crashed their plane into an American ship, they would become kami, guardian spirits, who would protect the homeland forever. Among the 50 planes heading for the Laffey, there were old rusty fighters, slow dive bombers, and even training biplanes made of wood and canvas. Anything that could fly was now a weapon. They were flying a one-way ticket to hell. And the USS Laffey was their destination. Back on the ship, the waiting is over. At 8:32, the lookouts screamed the warning. Planes in sight. 4 aircraft break away from the main cloud. They are HID-3 Avals. These are fixed landing gear dive bombers, looking like predatory birds with their talons permanently extended. They are the scouts, the vanguard. They dive from the clouds, their engines screaming. Captain Becton shouts the order. Commence firing. The Laffey shudders as her main battery opens up. The 5-inch guns on the Laffey are a marvel of technology. They are equipped with a secret weapon called the VT Fuse. It is a tiny radar set inside the nose of the artillery shell. The gunners do not need to hit the plane directly. If the shell passes within 70 feet of the target, the radar detects it and detonates the shell. The sky around the 4 Japanese planes fills with black puffs of shrapnel. It is a wall of flying steel. The lead Japanese pilot flies straight into it. A shell explodes near his right wing. The plane shudders, flips over, and smashes into the ocean 300 yards from the ship. The second plane tries to pull up. The 40mm Bofors guns catch him. These guns fire rhythmic, thumping bursts. Chug, 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 chug. They tear the tail off the bomber. It spins wildly and splashes into the sea. The remaining 2 pilots realize they have made a mistake. This tin can has teeth. They turn tail and run back to the safety of the clouds. A cheer goes up from the deck of the Laffey. We got 'em, did you see that? We splashed 'em. The young sailors are ecstatic. They just fought off 4 attackers and survived. They think the battle is over. They think they have won. But Captain Becton does not cheer. He keeps his binoculars trained on the clouds. He knows that what just happened was not a victory, it was a tactical disaster. By firing her guns, the Laffey has revealed her exact position. She has proven that she is a fighter. High above, at 10,000 feet, the Japanese flight commander looks down. He sees the white wake of the destroyer. He sees the black smoke from the guns. He realizes that this ship is a radar picket. As long as she floats, the American fleet is safe. He gets on his radio. He issues a command to the 50 planes circling behind him. He does not tell them to attack the carriers miles away. He tells them to focus everything on the single ship below. It is a tactical shift. It is the decision that turns a skirmish into a massacre. The Japanese formation changes. They do not come in a single line. They are too smart for that. They split up. Some planes drop low, skimming just 10 feet above the waves to avoid the radar. Others climb high into the sun, waiting to dive from the blinding glare. Some circle to the east, others to the west. It is a classic pincer movement. They are creating a kill box. No matter which way the Laffey turns, she will expose her broadside to an attacker. The sky, which was blue just minutes ago, begins to darken, not with clouds but with exhaust smoke. The horizon is filled with the silhouettes of Zeros, Judys, and Vals. On the deck of the Laffey, the cheering dies in the throats of the sailors. They look to the port side. Planes. They look to the starboard side. Planes. They look straight up. Planes. The sky has turned black. Commander Becton grabs the microphone for the ship-wide announcing system. All hands, he says, prepare to repel air attack. He does not say attack. He implies invasion. The 50 planes begin their run. They are not dropping bombs and leaving. They are coming to stay. The sound of 50 radial engines synchronized in a dive creates a noise that vibrates in the chest of every man on board. It is the sound of a swarm. The first 4 were just the opening act. The real show is about to begin, and the USS Laffey is center stage. 8:45 in the morning. The time for strategy is over. The time for survival has begun. The USS Laffey is no longer a hunter. She is a cornered animal. The first Japanese plane, an Naval, commits to its final dive. It is coming from the stern, flying through a storm of anti-aircraft fire. The 20mm Oerlikon gunners are hitting it. You can see the pieces of the cowling flying off. You can see the smoke trailing from the engine. But the plane does not stop. This is the physics of a kamikaze. It is not just a machine. It is a 3-ton kinetic projectile moving at 250 miles per hour. Even if you kill the pilot, the physics remains. The plane slams into the aft deckhouse of the Laffey. The sound is not like a bomb. A bomb makes a sharp crack. This is a crunch. It is the sound of steel tearing, glass shattering, and wood splintering all at once. The plane disintegrates. The engine block, a massive chunk of hot iron, acts like a cannonball. It shears through the bulkhead and smashes into the spaces below. But the horror of a kamikaze hit is not just the metal. It is the biology. When the plane shreds itself across the deck, the pilot goes with it. The young sailors on the aft guns are suddenly covered in a gruesome mixture. It is a spray of hydraulic fluid, burning oil, and human remains. There is no way to prepare a 19-year-old boy for that. To see an enemy soldier reduced to biological matter scattered across your own boots. Before the crew can even process the shock, the second hit comes. A Judy dive bomber, faster, heavier. It screams in from the starboard side. It aims for the exact same spot as the first plane. It crashes directly into the burning wreckage of the Val. This is where the situation turns from dangerous to catastrophic. The USS Laffey is now fighting a new enemy. An enemy that is harder to kill than the Japanese. Fire. But this is not a normal fire. This is a chemical nightmare. To understand why the Laffey was in such trouble, we have to look at the chemistry of 1945 aviation warfare. The Japanese planes were loaded with avgas, high-octane aviation gasoline. In the world of firefighting, we call this a Class Bravo fire. Avgas is a hydrocarbon. It is lighter than water. Its specific difference in gravity means that it floats. When the fuel tanks of those two planes ruptured, they released hundreds of gallons of this liquid. It did not just burn in one place. It flowed. It poured over the sides of the gun tubs. It washed down the ladders. It seeped through the ventilation grates. It was liquid fire. The damage control teams rushed forward with fire hoses. They sprayed salt water onto the flames. But because it was a Class Bravo fire, the water did not put it out. The burning fuel simply floated on top of the water. The water acted like a highway, carrying the fire deeper into the ship. The temperature on the aft deck skyrocketed. It reached 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, aluminum does not just get hot, it loses its structural integrity. It begins to melt like wax. The steel decks began to glow cherry red. The gunners in the aft mounts, specifically Mount 53, were now trapped in a ring of fire. They were breathing air that was superheated. It scorched their lungs with every breath. The smell was overpowering. If you ask the survivors what they remember most, it is never the sound. It is always the smell. It was a sickly sweet combination, the acrid bite of cordite from the guns, the heavy, oily stench of burning rubber and gasoline, and beneath it all the unmistakable copper tang of blood and roasting meat. It was the smell of hell. But the Japanese were not done. At 8:47, another Val dive bomber approached from the stern. The tail gunner on the Laffey, a man who had already seen two planes crash feet away from him, kept firing. The shells ripped into the Japanese plane. The pilot realized he was going to miss the crash. He was losing altitude too fast. So, in a final act of spite, he pulled the bomb release lever. The plane crashed into the water 50 yards behind the ship, but the bomb kept coming. It hit the surface of the ocean. Now, usually, a heavy object sinks. But at high velocity, hitting the water at a shallow angle, a bomb will behave like a skipping stone. It skipped once, twice. It slammed into the ship right at the waterline directly below the stern. The explosion was massive. It blew a hole in the hull, but worse, it sent a shockwave straight up into the steering gear room. Inside the ship, the heavy steel hydraulic ram that controlled the rudder was thrown violently to the side. It jammed, hard over. On the bridge, the helmsman spun the wheel. It spun freely. There was no resistance. "Rudder is not answering," he screamed. "Rudder is dead." Commander Becton looked at the compass. The ship was turning left, and it was not stopping. The rudder was stuck at 26 degrees to the port side. This was the engineering crisis that sealed the ship's fate. A destroyer relies on maneuverability. Its speed and its ability to turn are its only defense against suicide planes. But now, the USS Laffey was locked in a turn. She began to drive in a tight circle. Imagine the view from the sky. The ship is burning furiously from the stern. She is trailing a thick cloud of black, oily smoke, and she is carving a perfect white donut in the blue ocean. To the Japanese pilots circling above, this was the signal. A ship moving in a straight line is hard to hit. You have to calculate the lead. But a ship moving in a fixed circle, that is a predictable target. You know exactly where she will be in 10 seconds. The Japanese flight commander ordered the swarm to descend. They lined up like vultures. They attacked from all sides. Hit number 3. A Val dive bomber approaches from the port bow. The forward guns blast it. The pilot is killed. The plane hits the water, but its momentum carries it forward. It skips off the waves and smashes into the hull near the anchor chains. The explosion showers the bridge with shrapnel. Hit number 4. A Judy dives from high altitude. It is aiming for the bridge. It wants to kill the captain. At the last second, a burst of 40mm fire shears off its wing. The plane spirals out of control. It misses the bridge by inches and crashes into the mast. The mast is toppled. The radar antenna, the ship's only eye, is smashed. The radio antennas are severed. The Laffey is now deaf, dumb, and blind. Down in the engine room, the situation is terrifying in a different way. The engineers cannot see the battle. They are trapped below the waterline in a steel box. All they can hear is the sledgehammer blows of the kamikazes hitting the hull. Boom, boom, boom. The ship vibrates so violently that light bulbs shatter in their sockets, paint flakes off the walls. They can hear the shrapnel raking the deck above them like hail on a tin roof. And then the sound of the hydraulics failing. When the rudder jammed, the hydraulic pumps began to scream. It is a high-pitched mechanical shriek, the sound of metal trying to do the impossible. Then, silence from the pumps. The pressure drops to zero. The ship is hemorrhaging vital fluids. Oil, hydraulic fluid, water, and blood are mixing in the bilges. Back on deck, the heat is becoming unbearable. The fire on the stern has melted the electrical cables. The guns in the rear are cut off from power. This means the gunners have to operate the mounts manually. A twin 5-inch gun mount weighs almost 20 tons. Normally, an electric motor spins it. Now 2 exhausted sailors have to crank a heavy iron wheel to turn it. They are slipping on the bloody deck. Their hands are blistered from the heat. They are gasping for oxygen in the thick black smoke, but they do not stop. Why? Because they can see the next wave coming. There are still 20 planes in the sky. The Laffey is listing. She is burning. She is driving in circles. She looks like a corpse that hasn't realized it is dead yet. But inside the smoke, inside the heat, something is happening. The shock is wearing off, and the rage is setting in. The men of the USS Laffey are realizing that no one is coming to save them. If they want to live, they have to kill every single thing that flies. The ring of fire has closed around them, but they are about to show the world that fire does not always burn. Sometimes it forges. 9:10 in the morning. While the battle rages in the sky, a different kind of war is being fought inside the belly of the USS Laffey, the wardroom. In peacetime, this is where the officers eat dinner. It is a place of white tablecloths, silverware, and polite conversation. But at 9:10 on April 16th, the wardroom is a slaughterhouse. It has been converted into the main battle dressing station. The white tablecloths are gone. The tables are slick with blood. The floor is so slippery that the corpsmen have to sprinkle sand just to keep their footing. Dozens of wounded men are lying on the floor, waiting for help. The ship's doctor is working with a kind of frantic precision. He is covered in blood up to his elbows. He is performing surgery on a dining table. The conditions are medieval. The ship is rocking violently from the explosions. The lights are flickering on and off. Dust and asbestos fall from the ceiling every time a gun fires. He has run out of sterile bandages. He is using bed sheets. He is running low on morphine. There is a young sailor on the table. His leg has been shattered by shrapnel. The doctor looks at him. He knows he has to amputate, and he knows he has to do it now or the boy will bleed to death. But there is no time for anesthesia to take full effect. He puts a piece of leather belt between the boy's teeth. He looks him in the eye. He says, "Hold on, son. This is going to hurt." The scream that follows is drowned out by the roar of the 5-inch guns directly above their heads. This is the reality of the damage. It is not just holes in the steel. It is holes in the men. Further down in the ship, in the engineering spaces, another battle is happening. The damage control parties are fighting the fires. These men are heroes in the dark. They are wearing gas masks that fog up in the heat. Their uniforms are soaked with sweat and oil. The fire on the fantail is out of control. It is melting the boots off their feet. They point the hoses at the flames, but the water pressure is dying. The pumps are failing. Loss of pressure, someone screams. They do not give up. They grab buckets. They grab helmets. They start bailing water from the ocean and throwing it on the fire by hand. It is pathetic, really. A few gallons of water against 1,000 gallons of burning aviation fuel, but they keep doing it, because they know that directly below them is the magazine, the room stored with tons of high explosive ammunition. If the fire reaches the magazine, the USS Laffey will not just sink. She will vaporize, so they stand in the heat. Their skin blisters. Their eyebrows singe off. But they hold the line. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the situation has reached a breaking point. Commander Frederick Becton stands near the helm. He is a man of 40 years. He has a wife named Elizabeth back home. He has a future. He looks out at his ship. It is a ruin. The mast is broken. The radar is gone. The rudder is jammed. The stern is an inferno. The ocean around them is filled with sharks and oil. And the Japanese are still coming. A junior officer, a communications ensign, stumbles up to him. The young man is in shock. His eyes are wide. He is trembling uncontrollably. He looks at the captain. He looks at the burning ocean. He shouts over the noise. "Captain, we have to get off. She is going down." The officer points to the water. "Sir, look at the stern. We can't save her. We have to abandon ship." It was a logical suggestion. In fact, by Navy regulations, it was the correct suggestion. When a ship is this damaged, when the command and control is gone, when the defensive capability is zero, the captain's duty is to save the lives of his crew. To stay on board is suicide. Time seems to slow down for Captain Becton. This is the moment of the decision. We have to understand the psychology of this moment. In a high-stress environment, the human brain undergoes a combat stress reaction. The amygdala, the fear center, takes over. It screams, run, hide, survive. Logic shuts down. The instinct for self-preservation becomes overwhelming. The junior officer has succumbed to this. He is listening to his biology, but Captain Becton forces his brain to override the instinct. He thinks about his wife. He thinks about how much he wants to see her again. But then he looks down at the deck. He sees a gunner on the forward mount. The kid is bleeding from the head, but he is still passing shells. He sees a signalman trying to fix a flag halyard while bullets ping off the metal around him. Becton realizes something. If he orders abandon ship, the fighting stops. The men will jump into the water, and in the water they will be machine gunned by the Japanese planes. To abandon ship is to sentence them to death. To stay is also a death sentence, but at least if they stay, they die fighting. Becton turns to the young officer. His face is smeared with soot, but his eyes are clear, hard, cold. He steps close to the man. He grabs him by the shoulder. He does not shout. He speaks with a terrifying calm. "No," Becton says. The officer blinks. "Sir." Becton points to the forward guns. They are still thumping. "Boom, boom, boom. I will never abandon ship," Becton says, enunciating every word. "As long as a single gun will fire." He pauses. He looks the officer in the eye. "Now get back to your post." The officer stares at him. For a second, he looks like he might argue. But then something happens. This brings us to the value of leadership in crisis. Humans are social animals. We have something called mirror neurons. When we are terrified, we look to the alpha. If the alpha is scared, we panic. If the alpha is calm, we calm down. It is called co-regulation. Captain Becton just co-regulated his entire crew. The young officer nods. He swallows his fear. He stands up straighter. Aye, sir," he says, and then the word spread. You have to imagine how fast gossip travels on a ship. Even with the phones down, the message moved like electricity. A runner sprinted to the engine room. "The old man is staying," a gunner shouted it to the loader. "We ain't leaving," a damage controlman yelled it into the smoke. "Keep pumping, the captain says we fight." The morale shift was instantaneous. 5 minutes ago, the crew was fighting for survival. They were victims. They were waiting to drown. But now they were angry. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. They looked at the Japanese planes buzzing around them, and they stopped seeing them as executioners. They started seeing them as targets. A sailor whose gun had been destroyed picked up a Thompson submachine gun. He stood on the open deck, completely exposed, firing .45 caliber bullets at dive bombers. It was useless, but it was defiant. Down in the wardroom, the wounded men heard the news. A sailor with a broken back tried to get up. "Give me a gun," he rasped. "Prop me up." The ship was still burning. The rudder was still jammed. The odds were still zero, but the USS Laffey had changed. She was no longer just a collection of steel and wires. She had become a single, living organism with a single will. The Japanese pilot circling above saw a burning wreck. But he was wrong. He was looking at 300 men who had just decided that they were too stubborn to die. And they were about to prove it in the most violent way possible, because the Japanese were gathering for one final massive push. They were going to aim everything they had at the last functioning gun on the ship, Mount 53. The stage is set for the final stand. 9:25 in the morning. The USS Laffey is a broken ship. The forward guns are silent. The bridge is shattered. The rudder is dead, but the battle is not over. It has just moved to a different location. The entire war has now shrunk down to a steel box on the aft deck. Gun Mount 53. To understand the miracle that is about to happen, we first have to understand the machine. Mount 53 is a twin 5-inch gun turret. It is a beast of engineering. It weighs nearly 45,000 pounds. That is the weight of 10 cars stacked on top of each other. Under normal conditions, this massive weight is moved by powerful electro-hydraulic motors. A gunner simply moves a joystick and the turret spins instantly. But at 9:25, the cables are severed. The hydraulics are drained. The motors are dead. The mount is frozen. Inside the steel casing, the conditions are unlivable. The ventilation fans have stopped. The air is a toxic soup of carbon monoxide, cordite smoke, and sweat. The temperature is rising past 110 degrees. There are men inside this box. Gun Captain Lawrence Delusky, Pointer Andrew Bades, Trainer Benjamin Mello, they are trapped. The fires outside are so intense that the paint on the inside of the turret is bubbling. They cannot open the hatches. They have nowhere to run. They have two choices: sit there and bake to death, or fight. They choose to fight. But to fight, they have to do the impossible. They have to move 20 tons of dead weight with their bare hands. There are manual hand cranks inside the mount. Large iron wheels, they grab the handles. Train left, Delusky screams. The men heave. They throw their entire body weight against the cranks. The gears grind. Friction fights them every inch of the way. It takes agonizing effort just to move the barrels a single degree. Their muscles are screaming. Their lungs are burning. Their hands are slipping on the sweat-slicked metal. By all medical logic, they should collapse. The human body is not designed to sustain this level of exertion in this level of heat. So, how are they doing it? This brings us to the science of combat physiology. Right now, the brains of these men have engaged a primal override switch. It is called the sympathetic nervous system. A massive dose of adrenaline and cortisol is flooding their bloodstreams. This chemical cocktail does three things. First, it acts as a painkiller. The gunners do not feel the blisters on their hands. They do not feel the cramps in their backs. Second, it releases glucose reserves from the liver, giving their muscles a temporary superhuman strength. And third, it alters their perception of reality. This is the phenomenon known as tunnel vision. Under extreme threat, the brain decides that peripheral vision is a waste of energy. It narrows the field of view down to a tiny, focused circle. The gunners inside Mount 53 do not see the walls of the turret. They do not see each other. They do not see the fire. All they see is the crosshair in the optical sight. And then there is auditory exclusion. The ears stop processing background noise. The roar of the fire, the screaming of the metal, the explosions, it all fades away into a dull hum. They are in a trance, a hyper-focused state of survival. They are no longer men. They are biological components of the gun. 9:47 in the morning. The final test arrives. Out of the black smoke on the port side, a shape emerges. It is a Yokosuka D-4, why the Allies call it a Judy. This is not a slow, clumsy biplane. This is one of the fastest dive bombers in the Japanese arsenal. It is sleek, aerodynamic, and deadly. The pilot is coming in low. He is skimming the waves. He sees the burning destroyer. He sees the smoke. He thinks the ship is dead. He lines up his attack run. He is not aiming for the bridge. He is aiming for the stern. He wants to finish the job. He pushes the throttle to maximum. The Judy accelerates to 300 miles per hour. Let's do the math on that speed. 300 miles per hour is 440 feet per second. The plane is 2,000 yards away. That means the gunners in Mount 53 have less than 15 seconds to live. 15 seconds. Captain Delusky spots the plane through the periscope. Target, port side. 300. The gunners do not think. They react. They spin the heavy cranks. Heave, turn, heave, turn. The massive barrels of the 5-inch guns begin to swing, slowly, agonizingly slowly. The plane is getting bigger, 1,500 yards. The Japanese pilot sees the turret moving. He knows he has to be fast. He adjusts his flight path. He is coming straight down the throat of the gun. 1,000 yards. Inside the turret, the loader grabs a 55-pound shell. He shoves it into the breech. He follows it with a brass powder case. He punches the rammer handle. The heavy steel breech block slams shut. Clang. Ready, he screams. But the gun is not aimed yet. The plane is moving too fast. The manual tracking is too slow. 700 yards. The plane is now so close that the gunners can see the rivets on the wings. They can see the propeller spinning. The pointer, Andrew Bades, is looking through the sight. He is drenched in sweat. His heart is hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He spins the elevation wheel desperately. The crosshair creeps up. It is a race between the speed of the plane and the strength of the men. 500 yards. This is point-blank range. At this distance, if they miss, they die. There is no time for a second shot. The plane fills the entire optical sight. It looks like a monster. The crosshair finally locks onto the nose of the Judy. Bade screams. Fire! He stomps on the firing pedal. Nothing happens. The electrical firing circuit is dead. Panic. Absolute freezing panic, but the captain is ready. He grabs the manual firing lanyard. It is a simple rope attached to the trigger mechanism. He yanks it with all his strength. Boom. The sound inside the steel turret is deafening. It is a physical blow that shakes the teeth in their skulls. The twin guns recoil violently. The shell leaves the barrel at 2,600 feet per second. It does not have to travel far. It meets the Japanese plane just a few hundred yards from the ship. It is a direct hit. The shell strikes the Judy right in the engine block. The explosion is catastrophic. One moment there is a 3-ton metal warplane flying at 300 miles per hour. The next moment there is nothing. The plane simply evaporates. It turns into a cloud of aluminum confetti and burning gasoline. There is no crash. There is no splash. Just a fireball that hangs in the air for a split second. The momentum carries the debris forward. A piece of the landing gear bounces off the roof of the turret with a loud clang. The propeller splashes into the water just 10 feet from the hull. Inside Mount 53, the men freeze. They wait for the impact. They wait for the death that was promised, but it does not come. Slowly, the adrenaline begins to fade. The tunnel vision widens. The sound of the world rushes back into their ears. They look at each other through the thick, acrid smoke. Their faces are black with soot. Their eyes are wide and white. Their chests are heaving. They are alive. Captain Delusky puts his eye to the periscope. He scans the horizon. North empty, south empty, east empty, west empty. The sky is clear. The swarm is gone. He opens the heavy steel hatch at the back of the turret. Cool ocean air rushes in. He climbs out onto the burning deck. He looks up. The sun is shining. The water is blue. The silence that follows is heavier than the noise of the battle. It is a stunned, disbelief-filled silence. The USS Laffey is floating low in the water. She is a wreck. She is full of holes. She is bleeding oil and water, but the flag is still flying. The last stand is over. The men of Mount 53 collapse on the deck. They are too tired to cheer. They are too tired to cry. They just breathe. And for the first time in 80 minutes, they realize that they are going to live. 10 o'clock in the morning, April 16th, 1945. The guns finally stop. For 80 minutes, the air around the USS Laffey has been filled with the sound of the apocalypse. The scream of engines, the roar of explosions, the rhythmic thumping of the 40mm cannons. But now it stops. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is heavy. It presses down on the ears of the sailors like water. The only sounds left are the crackling of the fires on the fantail and the groaning of the twisted steel hull as it rolls in the ocean swell. Commander Frederick Becton lowers his binoculars. His hands are shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline crash. He steps out onto the wing of the bridge and looks at his ship. She does not look like a destroyer anymore. She looks like a floating scrapyard. The main mast is snapped in half, hanging over the side like a broken limb. The radar antennas are melted wire. The rear 5-inch gun turrets are black and twisted. The deck is covered in a sludge of oil, hydraulic fluid, and debris. But she is floating, low in the water, listing to port, but floating. The captain begins his walk. He needs to see the damage with his own eyes. He walks past the forward gun mounts. The sailors are sitting on the piles of spent shell casings. They are covered in soot. Their eyes are wide, staring at nothing. They look like coal miners who have just survived a cave-in. He walks to the wardroom, the medical station. The floor is red. The doctors are still working, stitching wounds by the light of flashlights because the power is out. 32 men are dead. 71 are wounded. That is 1/3 of the entire crew. Becton realizes that he has not just commanded a battle, he has presided over a massacre. But then a sound comes from the intercom. It is the engineering officer. "Captain," the voice crackles. "Engines are answering. We have power to the shafts." It is a miracle. The heart of the ship is still beating. Becton gives the order. A simple, quiet order. "Take us home." The USS Laffey begins to move. She cannot steer. The rudder is still jammed 26 degrees to the left. They have to steer by varying the speed of the propellers. It is clumsy. It is slow. But she is moving under her own power. The journey back to the anchorage at Okinawa is a surreal funeral procession. As the Laffey approaches the harbor, the sun is high in the sky. There are hundreds of other American ships anchored there. Battleships, cruisers, carriers. Usually a harbor is a busy, noisy place. But as the Laffey enters the perimeter, a hush falls over the fleet. Sailors on the other ships stop their work. They run to the railings. They climb the rigging. They crowd the decks. They stare in disbelief. They are looking at a ship that should not exist. They see the holes in the hull that are big enough to drive a jeep through. They see the charred remains of the Kamikaze planes still welded to the deck. They see the American flag, tattered and smoke-stained, still snapping in the wind. A whisper goes through the fleet. "The ghost ship. Look at that thing. How is it still afloat?" And then sound returns. It starts with a single siren from a nearby cruiser, then a whistle from a transport ship. Then every ship in the harbor begins to sound its horn. It is a deafening, overwhelming salute. It is the Navy's way of bowing its head to a survivor. The sailors on the Laffey, the kids from Iowa and Detroit, stand on the ruined deck. They hear the horns, and for the first time in hours the tears begin to fall. They are not crying for themselves. They are crying for the 32 friends who are not standing there with them. The naval engineers who inspected the Laffey later were baffled. By all the laws of physics and probability, she should have sunk within the first 20 minutes. The statistics of the battle are terrifying. 80 minutes of combat. 22 separate attacks. 6 kamikaze crashes, 4 bomb hits, and countless strafing runs. The ship took over 10,000 gallons of water into her hull. She lost most of her communications, her radar, and her fire control, but she never lost her will. The Japanese threw everything they had at this single tin can destroy her. They used their best pilots. They used their fastest planes. They used a tactic designed to break the mind of the enemy, and they failed. Why? It wasn't the steel. The steel was only half an inch thick. It wasn't the guns. The guns were jammed or broken. It was the people. It was Captain Becton refusing to abandon ship when logic said he should. It was the damage control teams running into the fire instead of away from it. It was the gunners in Mount 53 pushing 20 tons of metal with their bare hands because they refused to let their ship die. The USS Laffey was towed back to the United States. Most people thought she would be scrapped. They thought she was too broken to be saved, but the Navy fixed her. They welded new steel over the scars. They installed new guns, and incredibly, she went back to war. She served in the Korean War. She earned more battle stars. She refused to retire. Today, if you go to Charleston, South Carolina, you can see her. She sits quietly at Patriots Point. She is a museum now. Tourists walk her decks. Children play near the guns. The smell of burning oil and blood is gone, replaced by the smell of sea breeze and sunscreen. But if you look closely, you can still see the dents in the steel. You can still see the welds where the kamikazes hit. She is an old lady now, silent, peaceful, but she carries a legacy that is louder than any explosion. The story of the USS Laffey is not just a war story. It is a story about the human capacity for endurance. It teaches us that when the world is burning around you, when the odds are 50-1, and when everyone tells you to give up, you have a choice. You can sink or you can fight. Captain Becton and his crew made their choice. They decided that as long as they had one breath left in their bodies, they would not surrender. And because of that choice, the ship that would not die is still here to tell her story. Steel has a melting point. Iron has a breaking point. But the human spirit is unbreakable. If this story inspired you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us preserve these forgotten chapters of history. And if you want to see more stories of impossible bravery, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching. And remember, never give up the ship.